谢谢大家会谢北北时间，我是大叔萨，
我是大叔甲。
我们今天找到一位好朋友，然后讨论一件很有趣的事情，创新啊，当然创新本身是很有趣了，可是他会讲一些至少我个人的所谓的矽谷的宅男。从来没想过的事情，不过我们先介绍一下这个好朋友是那个山内教授，是 Yamauchi Yutaka。那因为我在美国矽谷认识他的，所以我们就在美国就是互相叫名字，就是Yutaka 桑。那他是那个京都大学的教授，然后他的这个教授职位有3个 appointment， 他一个是管理学院，一个是设计学院，然后还有经济学。这三个 school 的 appointment 就是一个很厉害的人这样子。那除了就是一个很厉害的研究人之外，他当然在美国我其实跟他是在 Palo Alto Research Center 或简称 Park 的同事，这个外联 Park 是另外一件故事了。那所以请问一下大叔甲，那个听众应该听什么呢？
这个山内老师自己是从一个不完全是一个科技的角度来看创新。那我们一般在台湾都把科技跟创新紧紧的连接在一起，所以今天老师带我们从不一样的一个角度来检视创新这一回事，所以我们来进入节目。Hello, welcome back. This is your favorite uncle, Uncle Ja. Today, yet again, we have Yutaka Yamauchi, Professor Yamauchi from Kyoto. Please say hi to our listeners.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great. Yutaka is no stranger because last time I'm sure everybody learned a lot about sushi. So, Uncle Sang, what do we talk about today?
Well, actually, it's what Yutaka would talk about, but I think recently we were having some discussion, and he said he's been working on innovation, and clearly it's a topic that I personally find very interested in, especially given sort of what you talk. When I think of innovation, I think of like Apple, the latest devices. But so I think it's very interesting to think about innovation in a larger context. So anyway, without further ado, I guess like how does innovation happens?
Yeah, so that's a major question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the common sense understanding of how an innovation happens is you kind of have a great idea, and you then understand the customers' needs, potential needs, because customers themselves don't know what they want. But you kind of understand what they want and fulfill those needs, then you become successful. That's the conventional understanding of innovation. But my view is a little different. I think innovation is an activity of history making. So we make history. So just to give an idea, we can think about Starbucks. Okay. So Starbucks is a major innovation, successful innovation. And how did it happen? So obviously, you could say Starbucks offered a great coffee that people loved. That's basically fulfilling their needs, right? Or maybe that Starbucks provided a third place where people can just hang out. Okay, that's another need. But I think the story is a rather bigger than that. So to think about Starbucks in the historical context, we need to go back to a company called Peet's Coffee,
which is
Yeah, I guess people living in California know Peet's coffee. Peet's coffee and tea leaves. So I don't know the exact name, but Peet's it comes from Mr. Alfred Peet. He is the guy who founded the company in '66 in Berkeley, California, right? So before Peet, the coffee in the US was mediocre. It's cheap and it was not great. You buy coffee in the supermarket and so on, coffee beans, right? Then Peet, because he had lived in other countries like Indonesia, and he knew the great coffee, right? So he started the business, and he started this whole innovation of specialty coffee in the US. Okay, so, and it's important that he did that in Berkeley, California, in the late '60s, which is key, right? Because in '68, we had a student protest. And Berkeley is basically
the center of it.
Center of it. Right. And San Francisco as well.
Of course. That's right.
Summer blah, but exactly the same time. The late '60s is, if you think about that, why did all students in the developed countries, protested? Why did they protest, right? It happened in France, US, even Japan, and some other countries. Okay. '68, baby boomers, right? They were born after the World War II. So in the late '40s, right? So they started to go to college in the late '60s, okay? So in the previous generation, their parents' generation, if you go to a college, you are kind of guaranteed to have a great career and you are successful, right? You can live in a huge house in the suburb and get a big car and get a job at a big company and all those things, right?
The American dream.
American dream, yeah. But because they are baby boomers and everybody went to college, not everybody, but many of them went to college. So they were just one of them. They couldn't be an elite, right? They were not satisfied with the education because a lot of people, came, but not many professors and all those things, right? But their frustration is they were just nobody, right? So they didn't know how to express themselves, right? So that was the dilemma of that time. And so Peet came, Alfred Peet came, and he provided specialty coffee from different terroir and different roasts and all those things, right? So basically, he gave them the way to express themselves in a new way, which is, I am sophisticated. I'm culturally sophisticated to appreciate that dark, thick coffee that nobody likes, and I can discern the taste. I like this one, but not that one. I can talk about it. That is their identity. Right? So the specialty coffee became very popular among cultural elites, right? And think about that. So Berkeley is the cutting edge in terms of the culture, right? And other things like Japanese started in Berkeley a little bit later. It's the California cuisine. It's a local, so you basically use the local ingredients, right? So that is also something that's also a way to appreciating Japanese is a way to express yourself, right? Okay, So then a lot of people got inspired by Pete, and one of them, or three of them, three entrepreneurs got inspired, and they started the same idea. They repeated the same idea in Seattle in 71. That's the Starbucks. Okay. So basically, they copied the model, and they kind of thought Pete was their mentor, and he was. And it's interesting that because when Pete retired, he sold the business to somebody else, and then the three entrepreneurs who started Starbucks actually bought Pete's coffee, right? And in the late 87, they basically gave up on Starbucks, and they shifted to Pete's, and Howard Schultz took over Starbucks. Right? So that's the thing. Okay, but the point is this. Okay, Starbucks and Pete was successful not because they kind of fulfilled their needs. Their needs in the sense that they wanted to express themselves. But what's important is that they made a history, right? Meaning that they understood the social change, historical context, and they sensed. They had the sensibility to understand people's frustrations. And then they gave form to the business in such a way that people can express themselves using the service. Okay, so they kind of show the new time. Okay.
Well, I mean, you know, I think just so to make sure that I'm sort of getting, you know, so sort of the major point. It sounded like, you know, any innovation obviously has to be good enough, and it has to be, you know, it fulfills specific needs. It has to be sort of tactically, operationally good enough. But I guess what you're saying is that what we often overlook in the context of innovation is look at sort of the larger fabric of history, right? You know, I mean, think of it as a mega trend, and then so are you going with the trend or are you bucking the trend? And that's the difference between, you know, whether or not the innovation, when the innovation is good enough, is it going to last? Because if it's going against the trend, then you might have the most amazing innovation, but just that's the wrong direction. Is that a reasonable sort of layman summary?
Yeah, exactly. But we are so trapped in the idea that you know, these innovators are a kind of genius, right? They all of a sudden they come up with an idea,
right?
But what they are doing is they are observing the society, right? They are seeing what's, you know, they feel the frustration people have, right? So and then of course, if you ask Alfred Pete, he wouldn't like elaborate that way, but you know, I'm sure he felt that frustration, right? So what I'm saying is, okay, so any innovation, of course, it's a fulfillment of needs in a larger sense, but it's not cut out of the society. You know, we tend to think to innovate, we need to be free from the past constraints.
Right? Think outside the box.
Right. Think outside the box, exactly. But we need to understand the context and social context and historical context. That is my point.
Right. Well, I mean, on that point, if I may, you know, I think Steve Jobs of Apple is, I believe he said that. Anyway, but he you know, he always goes about like he doesn't do market research. You know, he kind of anticipates, you know, what the market and I guess in that context, you know, in the context of sort of larger historic, I mean, I think that makes more sense to me now, but am I like reading too much into it, or, you know, the fact that he doesn't do market research, he just got lucky? I mean, you know, what do you think?
Okay, so market research in a sense that you ask users, right, what they want, or maybe, you know, you kind of do some test, right? User test.
Right.
But obviously, what he was thinking was the larger historical context, right? So, so what he did in the late 90s and the 2000s, it's it's not just beautifying the product. It's more than that, right? I think his innovation was a kind of critique of the existing industry, right? Yeah, so that in that sense, it's I think it has the same structure.
I guess the way I understand it is that it's not so much that he doesn't go through the typical process. It's just his process is a little bit different in the sense that, oftentimes a typical consumer, I won't speak about others, I'll speak for myself. I oftentimes don't know what I need or what I want until when I'm actually presented with a product that is a killer product. It's like, I often laugh at myself and say, well, I don't really need an iPhone until I was handed down one, and then I fell in love with it. And it's almost as
it's so obvious.
That's right. It's only obvious to me when the solutions are ready, right? So in that sense, so how do you, how do you sort of put all these things in a more systematic way where students and business people can actually, learn these lessons, in a sort of in a more organized manner rather than just kind of talking about these, bits and pieces. How do you pull it together?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing we should do is basically we should try to observe the society, right? And in many cases, Steve Jobs is not the first one to introduce smartphone, right?
Right.
We had many other things, and but think about this. Alfred Peet started, and then Starbucks started, and it was a copy, and then Howard Schultz actually joined, and he innovated. Right. And so everybody was inspired by something else. So they saw Peet's coffee, and they thought, oh, this is the future, right? And those kind of things tend to be in the peripheral, right? So last time we talked about McDonald's, right? McDonald's brothers started. But then it was Ray Kroc who saw it. But for innovations, we tend to think, oh, we have to have an original idea, right? But there's nothing original. When you think of, of course, in historical cases, there are many original. But even like a major innovation, like James Watt, he is supposed to have invented a steam engine.
That's right.
But then what he did was he just introduced a minor modification, improvement to the Newcomen engine, right? The Newcomen invented the engine, but Newcomen was invited by some other engines as well, right? So James Watt basically separated the condenser part from the piston. So what I'm saying is, so let's not try to come up with the original idea, which is not productive. Let's start by observing the society, right? And there are many innovations already going on in a peripheral manner, right? And then you see a future in those things, and then you try to redesign it. The redesign can be also very subtle, right? What Ray Kroc did to McDonald's was very subtle, and Howard Schultz, we didn't talk about that, but what he did was a little modification to Starbucks, but huge. Nobody else did in the late 80s, right? I guess we need to explain. So So Starbucks, original Starbucks was all about specialty coffee and drinking coffee, drinking thick coffee, dark roast, and those kind of things. But what Schultz introduced was basically latte, which is you have a lot of milk in it, so the coffee taste doesn't matter much. And then he introduced this non-fat latte, which is just doesn't have any taste.
Yes.
And then Frappuccino, which is sweet, which is totally against this coffee aficionado discourse, right?
Macchiato and all that, it's all sugar.
Yeah. But I'm not ridiculing Schultz because he is a genius, right? Because he knew that's what the people would resonate with, because it's the late 80s, right? If you think about the 80s, which is completely different from the 70s. 70s, people valued something authentic and heavy, right? And something traditional and heavy things. But 80s, it's the time of, it's the era of Reagan, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All of a sudden in the 80s, everybody had to be light, right? You know, heaviness was criticized because it was the appearance generation, and the whole thing about neoliberalism in the 80s was a critique of the existing social order, which is dominated by bourgeois elites, right? So it has to be light. So in a way, 80s aesthetic was this lightness. So Schultz introduced this idea of, okay, what people really want is the Italian language, not necessarily the coffee, but what he's a genius because he kept buying the most expensive coffee beans, right? He didn't compromise the quality of coffee. So I guess in the early 90s, I guess they had the problem with the coffee beans harvest, and they got into crisis, but they kept buying the expensive ones. So he was contradictory, right? But he knew what's needed. Yeah. So he was responding to the time. So he was making a history in his own way, right? So that's my point.
Right. So, yeah. No, I think you know it's so interesting to kind of look at things like Starbucks, which obviously most people, if not all people, are fairly familiar with, and kind of look at it not just as a place you get, you know, coffee, but you know, in a historic and innovation context. So on this point, you know, I think I'd like to, you know, ask about your program, right? I mean, you are now putting together in the Kyoto University, the Kyoto Creative Assemblage, and you know, can you kind of share a little bit about, you know, what the program is about, and how did the program come about?
Yeah. Okay, just to give you a context, give the audience the context. We got the funding from the Ministry of Education, MEXT, Japanese ministry. We were chosen. We are one of the two sites chosen by the ministry to launch a program to train professionals to be creative. So to train the creativity of those professionals. So, and then we are about to launch this program, and it will be funded for the next 5 years.
Nice.
And we will continue after that too. Okay, so the history of that is we kind of, at Kyoto University, we started design school in 2012. Okay. If you look back at that time, design thinking was very popular.
Yes.
And we kind of did that a little bit. But then basically I realized that it's actually not the it's actually not the right approach.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm a big fan of design thinking, and I teach that, and also mm-hmm. I believe design thinking has made a huge contribution to business, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. But everything has a limitation. So we kind of saw the limitation, and we explored an alternative approach to design. Mm-hmm. And the conclusion was we need to make history. We need mm-hmm. to make history. So then we got the opportunity to apply for this program. So I basically proposed this idea. Mm-hmm. So Kyoto Creative Assemblage, which is the name of the program, and mm-hmm. Assemblage is a theoretical term. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. It means gathering of heterogeneous mm-hmm. things. Mm-hmm. I see. 3 universities got together: Kyoto City University of Arts, mm-hmm. which is one of the oldest art school, and mm-hmm. then Kyoto Institute of Technology, and our school, mm-hmm. Kyoto University. Mm-hmm. So 3 mm-hmm. universities, and we work with the industries as well. Mm-hmm. So that's the assemblage. But the assemblage also means creativity is in the assemblage. It's not mm-hmm. creativity doesn't come from the inner nature of a genius individual. Mm-hmm. Creativity comes from the assemblage, mm-hmm. in which mm-hmm. the individual is is a part, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's the whole idea. Instead of coming up with a great idea, let's observe the society. Mm-hmm. And I was struck. So when I talked to this art school professors, mm-hmm. it was interesting. And I asked what the creativity is for them, and they said, we tend to think, okay, so these art schools, they teach students techniques to mm-hmm. draw or paint, mm-hmm. Beautiful things, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. They don't teach those techniques. Mm-hmm. What they teach is they teach students to observe. Mm-hmm. If they are painting a flower, observe the flower, mm-hmm. count mm-hmm. all the branches and mm-hmm. and all those things, and basically observe. And many people don't observe things.
Mm-hmm. Right? Yes.
To draw a flower, you have to thoroughly observe, mm-hmm. but mm-hmm. we tend not to do that, which is
strange. Yes.
But then the creativity comes from observing, right? Mm-hmm. So observing the society is the creativity. It's mm-hmm. not like coming up with a great future mm-hmm. ideas, mm-hmm. right? So that's my understanding. Mm-hmm. And again, so what we propose is innovation. So in order to innovate creatively, we need to make history. Mm-hmm. And so the core activity is understanding the society. So mm-hmm. that's the idea.
Now that's absolutely fascinating, because it was interesting you mentioned about how to observe closely and understand nature, or whatever thing that you're studying. I heard a similar story where this culinary teacher was trying to retrain a group of professional chefs to be coming out with new dishes, and his first thing is, okay, here's a piece of paper and pencil, draw a fish. And they know how to handle a fish, but often I said, wait, where did this thing go on a fish? And so I think that's really fascinating. But I think the other thing I'd like to sort of get your take on, and this is sort of a Taiwan context. And I'm sure that Taiwan is famous for making stuff. Taiwan is also famous for TSMC, which is the world's mm-hmm. biggest semiconductor companies. But I believe, and please feel free to disagree, that in Taiwan there is a fair amount of anxiety in the context of in Taiwan, all the companies and all the best people are very good engineer. They can make a chip go faster and faster. But I think to your point, as you mentioned, understanding the fabric of history, there is not a lot of appreciation for that. As a matter of fact, sort of the general education system, parents would say, don't read anything else. Just, get your double-E degrees and then you'll be set. But, in the background, it's like, but there's art, there's history, there are things that, you should travel. So there's a lot of tension to this. So I guess other than just renting, how does your program kind of look at this inherent tension, as it were? Because, you do want to have better and cheaper chips, right?
Yeah, good question. So if you think about, so obviously we are not looking at that side of innovation, okay? So we are looking at the side of Apple's or some other Japanese companies. They don't produce chips anymore, they buy chips.
Yes.
So from TSMC.
Wait, isn't TSM working with Sony to build a fab?
Right. So Sony builds image sensor, CMOS image sensors.
That's right.
But Sony's image sensor is double layered, right? So it has a logic board behind it. That one can be bought from TSMC, but they just build the CMOS image sensor. But anyway, but the point is, so we are looking at the other side, which is those companies who have to innovate, in the face of consumers, right?
Right.
So Taiwan made the right decision to focus on the other side. And it's the strongest in the world right now. But so I don't know the answer what to do, but obviously all the other companies on the other side have to innovate from the cultural and the historical point of view. That's our point. And because Taiwanese companies are working with them to provide solutions, they should probably understand what their clients are up to. But at the same time, if we take a longer historical perspective, their business is also historical in the sense that, B2B business is less, it has some distance from cultural and historical perspectives. But these days, B2B companies, they also do. So in Japan, for example, right, they do, many B2B companies do a lot of TV advertisements, which is strange because they don't sell to consumers.
Right.
Good point. Yeah.
Right. But what they do is they are basically expressing what they are. Right. They are.
It's a corporate identity kind of.
Right. Yeah. So that gives me a sense that these B2B companies, they also need to think about the culture. So that is my understanding. But TSMC is all you have. Taiwan has great culture, and in many ways, you are presenting many culture innovations, and so it's not like I'm not downplaying that aspect.
Sure. I love the ideas, or the two key ideas I'm hearing from Yutaka today is, one is, people need to have a better sense of history. And the second one is, the ability to observe. And both of them are really rather Zen-like to me anyway. It's like, like, do you really see what's in front of your face? What's in front of your eyes? And so like, and both of these two things are not necessarily the most important, sort of academic disciplines, both in Japan and here in Taiwan. So when you talk about these kind of things, especially in the context of your Kyoto Creativity Assemblage program, what kind of reactions are you getting, and are people, I'm assuming people are getting on board, but tell us about those things.
Right. Okay. So again, design thinking has been used probably the last 10 years. And I guess a lot of companies, a lot of people are frustrated that, although it has made a major contribution, it's actually not enough. Okay, nothing is enough. So
that's it.
That's kind of why people started to talk about art thinking. Now it's the art. So we are at the stage. So I've been proposing this idea the last 6 years, right? Nobody listened.
Yeah, waiting for the right history moment.
That's right.
Right. But now I guess people are seeking alternative. So when I propose it, nobody immediately understands this idea, but they kind of see something promising.
So, wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh,
they might have heard you, but they didn't listen. At least the first time.
Now, this is your 1968 moment.
Yes.
Well, actually, so just very quickly, the program itself is starting the coming academic year. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
So our academic year starts in April. So we are starting after April.
That's right. And then this is going to be a graduate level course, or is this like a certificate, or?
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't teach university students, graduate students. We recruit students from companies.
I see.
Yeah.
So professionals, and then is it in Japanese, or?
Yeah, so it will be in Japanese.
Excellent.
But obviously we need to explain these things in English as well. So we will make an effort to expand it in English as well.
Oh, that's very exciting.
I see Uncle San ready to apply already.
Yes, I was like, maybe we could get you to come back and and possibly even talk to some of your students, kind of
Right.
get, I think this type of thing has always been, I guess this is sort of Asian thinking, right? A lot of it is Asian culture, and this obviously a unfair statement in many ways, but people feel more comfortable when there are specific formulas or there's a very logical thing you just follow, and I mean just the mere words of again quoting the late Steve Jobs, stay hungry, stay curious. It's like, no, parents don't tell you to do that. But in any case, so I think our time's up, and again, thank you so very much, Yutaka. It's always fascinating to talk with you, and I hope you will come back and we can talk more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Please invite me back. Right.
Yes, definitely. Okay, bye.哇，非常感谢这个山内老师 Yutaka 跟我们分享什么叫创新。那其实这个节目之前我稍微提过，就是从一个矽谷 长大的宅宅，就说创新跟科技是没有关系的，这是太有趣了。不过他听他这么讲，我觉得真的，真的耶，就是这时候我就要讲一个我很伟大的丢脸故事。我丢脸故事很多，所以这是其中一个，就是那个 Steve Jobs 的 iPhone 刚出来的时候，那个时候在矽谷嘛，然后跟我那些朋友们，就是在相关行业，然后我们这样讨论的时候，觉得我们的结论就是说 iPhone 一定会失败，因为它没有任何一个东西是新的。我们都知道，我们可以跟你说什么东西是从哪里来，什么的。然后呢，当然啊，这很明显，我应该不需要解释 ，iPhone 是就是全世界最成功的产品之一。那可是就是透过这个Yutaka 的角度，就是其实他就是 Steve Jobs 对于这个所谓的人文历史的走到这个阶段的一个所谓的 critique 就是之前的这个已经有 smartphone， 可是你如何让 smartphone 变成是一个新的东西？可是它其实是所谓的这个台湾也都会讲说是站在巨人的这个肩膀上。所以他是真的站上去了，然后把它推上去这样子。那大叔家你觉得呢？
我觉得的确是这样子，因为Steve Jobs 自己常常喜欢讲说，那个好的艺术家借别人的想法，然后更厉害的艺术家就直接剽窃。所以我觉得 Steve Jobs 本身真的是，那他剽窃的也有道理啦，就是说他就是就像刚刚大叔常讲的说，每一个东西它分开都没有不是一个没见过的东西，但是他用他的角度去把它融合在一起，这本身其实也是一个很大的创新哈。然后让我想到说，那个 Starbucks 跟他 Starbucks 早期的这个 Peace Coffee 的这个关系也是一个很有趣。一开始的这个 Peace Coffee 当然就是非常非常非常就是以咖啡为基础的一个咖啡的连锁店，然后他把它从意大利引进来到美国。但是我觉得我们大家也都知道后来的故事说 Starbucks 好像又把它推上更上一层楼。那大叔常认为说 Starbucks 跟 Peace Coffee 这个他做了什么东西 Peace Coffee 没做的呢？
应该说我什么东西没做，就是我没有去买他的股票。
对，我也没有买。我每次买 Starbucks 看到 Starbucks 股票说还能再往上吗？还能再往上吗？我每次都被证明是错误的，很明显就是可以。
我觉得这件事情真的是很有趣啦，就是说特别是这一点，我真的很感谢 Yutaka， 他就是说就是人家为什么可以当京都大学教授，就是他可以用一个大家都听得懂，而且真的就是跟所谓传统 technology 没有关系的例子来分析那所以就是回到刚才讲的这个 Peace 跟 Starbucks， 他就讲到一个所谓的时间的观念。在我们但是以美国为例，就是70年代，因为有一些反战等等这些抗争的过程里面，在那个时候的氛围就是 Peace， 就是我就是非常的文青，或者我是愤青还是什么青的，所以呢我就喝那种很苦，然后很厉害，要讨论这个咖啡几度等等。可到80年代，就是说你如果够老的话，你还记得那个头发啦、肩膀的那要 pad 啦，就是其实大家是很 happy 的，就是每跟那个时候，所以 Starbucks 就是开始有 latte。什么是 latte？ 就是很苦的咖啡放很多牛奶，所以你其实是喝苦的咖啡，可是喝不出苦味儿所以就是这个点真的太厉害了。
对，意思就是说，不好意思，就是经营 Starbucks 这些团队，他能够很精准的抓到那个人们在那个时间点需要什么，还是有一点点小文青，但是不能太苦。
对，就是说它这个是一个所谓 incremental 的，那也就是那这个时候当然就是要，因为我没有任何立场讲任何话，所以我就是要说，这个台湾一直在讨论说什么我们就是这个代工等等，其实我觉得这个是还有一些蛮值得想象的地方，就是说代工本身是没有错，只是当我们想说我们要 除了代工人还要做别的事情的时候，我们可以要怎么去想这件事情嘛？就说怎么去，就像Starbucks 其实是因为 Peace 很多东西让他们做一些这个创新的改变。那当然这个背后就会有一些创新不是你想到一件事情马上就大发，没有这种事情吧？是大家不要忘记贾伯斯当年他是被公司的董事赶走的，他不要忘记这件事情。
他是被他自己创立的公司的董事们赶走的，这是更太残忍了。
对，而且那个是他已经连那个 Mac。就是这个苹果的第一个这种像 iPhone 那么伟大的产品，它创造出来的时候被赶走。anyway， 这是另外一件故事了。然后这边也很有趣，但也跟大家这个Yutaka有提到说，他跟日本的教育部有特别有一个 program 由他经营，叫做那个 Kyoto Creative Assemblage， 就是他其实就是在教这个在职的人，就是有工作经验的人，怎么去看 innovation， 怎么去看历史、人文等等。我那个时候我问他说，他这个 program 本来是应该说他 program 是 design 是用日文的，那当然除了这个因为日文不够好就很讨厌。不过他是有提到说，这个 program 如果做得不错的话，他们当然会希望能够融入这个世界市场，所以也会有些什么英文啊等等的这样子。那我个人也是非常的期待。这样子
我也是，对，这种跨领域，我觉得真的是，其实大家都知道，就是贾博士一开始就是开始在搞跨领域的，所以当然这个名词是很新的，但是过去这些重大的这种所谓的 innovation 也好，或是重大的转折，其实都是跨领域的一些想法给碰撞出来的。
是啊。所以 anyway 就是这个希望我们下次有机会再请他来讨论一些真的就是我是蛮佩服他，因为大家如果还记得的话，他有讨论过为什么日本的sushi比较好吃，这太酷了。Anyway， 好，那我们今天节目大约到这边，谢谢大家的时间。然后我们下个礼拜有另外一个也是非常酷的节目，我们现在开始进入台湾魂。什么叫台湾魂呢？我们下礼拜找到一位专家讨论安菇粿。你没有听错，安菇粿，我也之前以为这是什么，这是小时候的东西啊，这有什么了不起？然后一听，真的好多学问。所以 anyway， 好，那我们今天节目到这边，谢谢大家时间，拜拜，
拜拜。
谢谢大家收听今天的谢伯伯时间。在节目正式结束之前，我们要感谢谢伯伯时间的制作团队。我是 Hannah， 我们的团队成员还有 Ariel、Lalisa 跟 Oliver。当然也别忘了大叔桑及大叔甲。如果你喜欢我们的节目，别忘了订阅、按赞、分享、留5颗星。有任何想法都欢迎留言告诉我们。而在这段疫情里，大家也要记得照顾自己，关心身边的人。祝大家平安健康，我们下集见咯，拜拜。